So I am thrilled to welcome all of you to the webinar this evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Lauren Levine. I am your host and moderator. We got a great turnout, right around 200 people registered. As always, as I start my webinars, I hope everyone's staying healthy and safe out there. I commend you all for being here this evening, continuing your dental education. I think we got a really interesting topic tonight. I'm only going to speak for a couple of minutes. I want to make sure that Jeremy can speak for as long as he needs. We also want to leave time at the end for questions. Most of you have been on the webinars in the past. I've been doing this for close to 10 years now, so many of you have been on the past. If it's been a while or you forgot, on your screen you have a GoToWebinar control panel. You can go ahead and type in your questions. Obviously, when we have 200 people on a call, we can't do verbal questions, but we will try our best to make sure we get to all of the written questions at the end. In the next few days, look for a couple of things. First off, as always, I record the webinar, so you will be sent an email with a link to download the entire recording. So if for some reason you can't make it to the end or you get a little distracted, don't worry about it. We are recording everything. During the webinar, Jeremy is going to show some of the products and systems that he uses, which are exclusive to Tuxedo Imaging. I want to thank them for their sponsorship of this webinar. They're the ones that are bringing in this amazing speaker. We got the CEO, so it doesn't get any better than that. They're the one, Tuxedo's the one to help us, we come up with the content. I get a lot of questions about continuing education credit. I'm going to try it at least a couple of times this evening. After the webinar is over, there's literally nothing you need to do. There's no registration, there's no quiz, there's no test. What happens is that when you logged in, when you clicked on that link, it said to me, this person is signed into the webinar, and when you log out, I will have a record of that as well. As long as you are here for the bulk of the webinar, I think it's like 60, 70%, whatever that number is, then you will be sent a CE certificate. That usually will happen sometime this evening. I might do it. It might be tomorrow morning, but at some point you will get that. But like I said, there's really nothing that you need to do on your end. So when you're done with the webinar, you just log out, and I've got it all handled on this end. So as I mentioned, I'm really happy about tonight's topic. Technology is always a hot topic, and we're seeing just, the rate of advancement in some of the high-tech things out there, like cone beam and digital impressions and CAD/CAM and AI. It's staggering. But, these are still somewhat niche products with considerably less than 50% market penetration. That being the case, almost every office takes x-rays, and digital is now more prevalent than film. While a lot of offices tend to focus on, what I consider to be somewhat meaningless statistics like the line pairs per millimeter or comfort, which is really kind of hard to measure, the bottom line is critically important for so many practices. The challenge, I think, for a lot of offices is trying to figure out the true TCO, the total cost of ownership, especially when there's all these multiple recurring charges, is really challenging. So one of the things we're going to do tonight is introduce you to a company that I guess would qualify more like old school, because back in the day when I started my practice in '92, when you bought a product, the company stood behind that product and they didn't charge you a fee to earn that support. That's truly a rare animal indeed today. So with that out of the way, I am thrilled to welcome Jeremy Muller tonight. He is a 20-year dental industry veteran. He worked in Johnson & Johnson's dental division, and he led teams at Dentsply Sirona before heading commercial operations at Source Club, which is a procurement partner for practices and DSOs. His experience really spans the entire spectrum, from cone beam to prophy paste. Today, Jeremy is the CEO of Tuxedo Imaging, which is a leading imaging manufacturer based in Akron, Ohio. So please welcome Jeremy. Jeremy, we're thrilled to have you and looking forward to the presentation.
Well, thank you, Dr. Levine, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So when you said 20 years on that, it kind of struck me a little bit, just how long I've been working with dentists across different products and different companies. So, but really excited to be here and just have a discussion regarding digital imaging and workflows and ways really to get what you need as a dentist and a dental staff to be able to help your patients at the most budget and cost-effective way. We're finding that more and more dental practices these days are getting nickel and dimed from every which way, whether it's product companies or software companies or suppliers or things like anything in between. So we're trying to figure out a way to get the images and diagnostics that you need in the most cost-effective way is really what we're passionate about here at Tuxedo Imaging, and excited to go through this presentation then. So as we discussed, or as you guys probably saw when you registered, I do definitely want to go over the goals of this webinar today then. So, but I'm not going to read this word for word. I think that would be pretty boring here on a Tuesday evening. But really what we're looking to do is identify the different pieces of a digital imaging workflow, find the ways to make that as cost effective as possible, but still get the diagnostics that you need. One of the key parts down here is compare different sensor technologies. Quite honestly, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because most of the sensor technologies today are fairly similar, actually. And so but I think there's some good lessons to be learned in that. We'll learn how to make your sensors last longer, hopefully. And then also just things to avoid when you're looking at contracts, whether that's with software companies, sensor companies, or anything in between. So why does dental imaging matter, right? In my history of working with dental practices, there's always been a few things that I would look at and say, you can live without this, but you can't live without that. And I think, in a dental practice, there's a few things that you're absolutely necessary. One, a vacuum pump these days, right? An air compressor and a handpiece. Because if none of those things are working, the entire office is shut down. But I'm going to put diagnostics in that as well. Because if you can't see what is happening in the patient's mouth and then communicate it to the patient, you're also dead in the water on that. So, dental imaging is extremely important for getting diagnosis, treatment planning, and patient education. And when we get really good with imaging and showing this to the patient, you'll see your case acceptance go up due to the patient trust going up as well. And then finally, when we switch from film to more digital now, the efficiencies are much greater. We're not developing film and putting them on the light boards and everything else like that anymore. But it's still important that anything we can do to cut out extra keystrokes, things like that, those efficiency gains in a dental imaging platform are definitely going to help your practice out. Now, the key with all that is balancing quality with affordability, and that's really what we're going to try and dive into today then. So what problems do typical practices face on this? Well, one, there's just huge upfront costs of sensors and software. Now, the cost of sensors have come down over the last 10 to 15 years, but they're still a decent price at this point. My first car I ever had, I paid $1,000 for, and then my second car was $3,000. And even now, 30 years later, sensors are still more expensive than that. So while the costs have come down, the cost of sensors are still up there. Software is interesting, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more because now we have on-premises software and we also have cloud-based software. And they're way different cost structures on whether you're having an on-premises versus cloud-based software. In terms of ongoing fees and hidden costs, there are a lot of them, and you can get hit with both the software side and the hardware sensor side on this. And so we're going to try and cover that as much as possible as well in the time that we have today. And then obviously, sensors are, they're durable medical equipment, DME, as we like to say within the industry here. And with that being said, they are not, they're designed to last around 5 years, but depending on how rough your staff are on them or your patients as well, they may not last that long. And so the risk of repairs and replacements can drive the cost even higher. And then if you're a smaller practice, and then, when I say smaller, I mean not a large DSO, you don't have the economies of scale that they do to pressure suppliers to lower your costs then. So, there's some pitfalls to be had with that as well. So first things first, though, let's take a look at the next piece of it, which is what are all the components of a digital practice then? So first and foremost, it's going to be the software, right? And there's two different pieces of this. You have your practice management software and you have your imaging software. Now, many times I'll talk to offices and I'll ask them, what imaging software are you running? Because that's what matters most when you're looking at a sensor is will my sensor communicate and have direct integration with your imaging software? Inevitably, though, most dentists I talk to only know really what practice management software they're running. A lot of times they'll tell me I'm using Dentrix. Like, okay, well, that's actually a practice management software. Now, they do have a bolt-on or a rebrand of another software that they can put into it then. And so that can actually create some confusion in this as well, but also let you know exactly how it will all work together then. So with that being said, there's also the operating system inside your computers itself. Now, almost every practice I talk to is running Windows 10 and getting pushed into Windows 11 here very soon. If you have questions about that, Dr. Levine's the guy for that, not myself, actually. So, but when we're looking at all these different softwares, they all have to play well together. They all have to communicate to each other. And so we'll dive into a little bit more about that as we go through here as well. Then we have the hardware piece. So we have the computers themselves. And so whether you're running laptops, desktops, Macs, different workstations, if you're rolling around, have a little workstation you roll from operatory to operatory, that's a huge component of this as well. Obviously, the sensors these days are very important for digital imaging. And that's my expertise and where a lot of this webinar is actually going to go down. The networking, what type of Wi-Fi system do you have, routers, and all those good things, and then backups. Especially these days with the amount of cyber attacks that dental offices have been seeing, whether it's Henry Schein or a lot of oral surgery groups have had cyber attacks going after them lately. Having good backups is really, really important. As I mentioned before, integration is a huge component of the digital office, and you need to make sure that all these things work together as seamlessly as possible. I'm sure if you're a digital practice, you've run into issues before where one piece isn't speaking to another piece, and you've had one software company blaming another software company for it, and they're blaming the other company. So making sure that it's as seamless as possible is one of the best ways to make sure that your practice is keeping costs in line. And then finally is the security, right? Data protection and HIPAA compliance is extremely important these days for a digital office. So whether it's cyber attacks and for just getting into your system or patient information, you want to be very cognizant of that. So let's dive into a little bit about software. So I mentioned before that there is a huge difference between the practice management software and then the imaging software. Now, it's still really important that they speak to each other. So I have on the screen here examples of kind of both of these. So the first one that I will mention is Denticon, which is owned by Planet DDS. Now, Planet DDS, 4 or 5 years ago, was just Denticon and Cloud9. So they had a practice management software for general dentistry practices and then one for orthodontic practices. But what they didn't have was an imaging software. So they went and bought Actrix in order to have that imaging software that will seamlessly integrate with their practice management software. Now, Denticon, like many other practice management softwares these days, still wants to be open architecture. They would love for you to use Actrix. However, if you want to use Dexis or XDR or Overjet's Iris, they will build in the APIs to make sure that's as seamless as possible for you. Now, you also have a company like Open Dental. They don't really have an imaging software, So they rely on those connections to make sure it's as seamless as possible on that. Now, you also have, well, actually, I think I'm supposed to get into this a little bit later, but I get excited and I start seeing all these things on the screen. You have on-premises software like a Tiger View, and then you have the cloud-based ones like an Iris from Overjet now. And that really starts to play into the total cost of ownership for your software components. So the things though, when we're looking at the software, these are the main things that you need to look at and want to think about before you invest in one. Or if you have invested in one and you're looking at another one, these are the things that you definitely want to look out for. So first of all, integration with your practice management software. Does it have a direct link or does it have a double entry? So direct link is true integration. This is where the imaging software is connected directly into the PMS. So when you type in John Smith into the practice management software, then it automatically will pull up the right information, pull the right information from the imaging software as well. You know, if your staff has to manually enter patient info into the imaging software and then also do it into the practice management software and then try to bridge those two things together, that is a lot of extra clicks and things that you want to look out for. So making sure that you have true direct link integration is one of the primary things that you'll want to ask both a practice management software and an imaging software company to make sure that those two systems will speak to each other. This is probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing change in the marketplace today. So I'm going to use an example here. Many, many years ago, Netflix threw a wrench into the entire video rental landscape. And, you know, as opposed to Blockbuster, where we would all walk in and pick out, well, I'm old enough to remember VHS tapes before we turned them into DVDs and then Blu-ray players. And then Netflix said, well, why are we even going into this place? It costs very little to ship a CD or a DVD, so let's just go down that route. So that's kind of what we talk about with on-premises software, us going into Blockbuster or getting the DVD direct from Netflix. However, nowadays, everybody's moving into the cloud. And now you can just, obviously, everybody is streaming nowadays. I think, actually, I read a really interesting article recently that said record albums actually outsold CDs for the first time in 30-something years last year. But we're all moving into Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, all these streaming services. And it's the exact same thing you're going to see with practice management software as well as imaging software. And the reasons are twofold. One is it talks on the screen here about speed and control versus remote access and updates. There is some advantage for sure that you can have remote access and updates just done automatically from the cloud versus being, you know, having to get an update and take a patch and get it emailed to you or over the cloud as well for your on-premises software. The main reason though is that every single one of these software companies wants customers for life. They want the whole idea of SaaS, software as a subscription or software as a service, is that it makes it very hard to move away. And so that's why all these companies are going down that route, because they have guaranteed recurring revenue and the switching costs are very, very difficult. So it's going to be harder and harder as you go forward trying to find a practice management software that's on premises or an imaging software that is on premises nowadays. Everything is moving towards cloud-based on that. So that's just one thing to look out for. And, you know, even if you are on an on-premises one now, you're definitely going to want to keep your options open as everything gets pushed into the cloud eventually. So when you're sort of looking at these considerations then of licensing and costs, you know, you have to look at the number of seats that you need. And you want to look at upgrade fees, right? And so, you know, as Dr. Levine mentioned, I was at Dentsply Sirona for many years. You know, we had CEREC, and if you're part of the CEREC club, you got the updates automatically. However, if an upgrade is automatically on the software piece, However, if you weren't, some of those upgrade fees would be $5,000, $7,000. Once again, why do they want you to be part of the club? It's guaranteed recurring revenue. So that's what all these companies are going towards. So when you're looking at licensing and costs of your either practice management software or imaging software, how many seats do you need? What are the seats based off of? Is it based on workstations? Is it based on per user that you're going to have? Renewals, and how long is your pricing locked in for? That's other questions you want to look at as part of your also overall contracts on that. So obviously one of the big pieces of this though is still going to be your user experience and the amount of support that you get. I've always said that working with dental practices, that dentists tend to buy things for two main reasons for their practice. Will this make my life easier, or will it help me increase the production of the practice then? So the inverse of that is true as well. If this makes myself or my staff's life harder, I'm definitely not going to buy it then. So you want the user experience on a software to be robust enough to do the things you need it to do, but simple enough that if you have turnover, they can come in and learn it pretty quickly as well then. Now, strong vendor support is probably the most important thing across all of these, because if you buy a software and it's super cheap and you can't get support when things go bad, then it becomes I was going to say paperweight, but it's in the cloud. Most of these things are in your computer, so it's not really a paperweight, but it becomes a useless piece of software for you then. So the amount of vendor support is extremely important. And with that, it's how long is it going to take the support to get back to you? Some companies I talk to, they have a policy of getting back to you within an hour. I talked to one the other day where their policy is you submit the ticket and we will get back to you in 72 hours. Well, if you're a dental practice and your software isn't working, 72 hours is an absolute nightmare. So these are the things you want to ask your vendors on the front side of is, what is your minimum or what is the maximum response time you'll have for me? And then what is your average response time as well? And then the last piece is hardware integrations. This is a really interesting thing, especially with imaging software, because so many of them are, they're like Apple, right? So I'm actually speaking to you through my iPhone as I'm showing this on the phone, and I love my Apple phone, and I love my Apple operating system because it makes my life super easy. However, there's a cost to be had with doing that, and so I could buy a lot cheaper phone, but it's not going to play as well inside my operating system then, my iOS operating system. So when you're looking at imaging software, you'll want to see if it plays well with third-party sensors. Because if it doesn't play well with third-party sensors, I guarantee you they're going to charge you an arm and a leg for the sensor itself. And we'll show that. And then also with cameras and any other devices that you're working in this, you want to ensure that with hardware integrations, it will work with third-party. And if so, are there extra costs involved in that? There are some imaging software companies out there that will allow you to unlock it, but there's a massive, $3,000 fee in many cases to get that piece done and unlocked then. So this is really where I'm going to spend a lot of time though. As the CEO at Tuxedo Imaging, I know hardware better than I know the software piece. I know enough on software to make me dangerous. Hardware, this is where we really spend our time at Tuxedo Imaging. So we're going to spend most of the time on sensors though, because that's the biggest what if factor. X-ray heads are pretty standard at this point, other than choosing whether you wanted a wall-mounted version versus a portable version. They pretty much do the same thing. Now, with that being said, I've actually seen many times where people have called me complaining about the image quality of a sensor, and we'll go into the office and we'll take a look at the sensor, and it seems to be perfectly fine, but they're running a very old X-ray head, and those things do wear out over time. And so if you haven't calibrated your X-ray heads and you haven't replaced them in a very long time, that could actually be causing a bigger problem than your sensor. So that's one thing to definitely check out. If you have a portable unit, or if you wanted to go to one of your suppliers and say, hey, I think I have an issue with my big X-ray head, I'm sure they would love to run in there with a Nomad and give you and see if it's the X-ray head or if it's the sensor, because they would love to sell you one of those Nomads. So with all that being said, there are four main things that I find dental practices are looking for when it comes to evaluating the sensors themselves. The first one is going to be image quality, because if you can't see what you're looking for, then it doesn't matter anything else that we're going to talk about. The second piece, patient comfort. This is actually interesting. I didn't think about that when I first started here at Tuxedo Imaging, and then I had a friend who runs a dental practice. He's like, Jeremy, patient comfort is really, really important. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll definitely bring that up in when we have these sorts of discussions. Next is compatibility. Will it work with my imaging software? It will not matter with the practice management software. It 100% matters when we're talking about the imaging software. In my opinion, this is the most important part that we need to discuss. And then finally is the total cost of ownership, right? It's not just the upfront cost of the sensor. There are many other factors to it on this as well that we will dive further into. So image quality though. So as Dr. Levine said at the beginning of the webinar here, he mentioned line pairs per millimeter and pixels. And basically, I'm not going to get into all the physics behind this, but I'm going to go into it a little bit just because this is a digital imaging webinar, and I definitely want to make sure that I give you a couple points on this. So everybody talks about line pairs per millimeter, and I find very few people even know what that means. So basically what it is it's a measure of resolution. It's how many distinct black and or white lines pairs the sensor can show in 1 millimeter. So in 1 millimeter on the sensor itself, right? So not when it's blown up onto your screen, but on the sensor itself. So the standard number at this point is 20. Whether you're talking Dexis or the Tuxedo sensor or any number of the other competitors out there, we all pretty much have the same image quality of 20 line pairs per millimeter. The exceptions to that are going to be Schick, which has 33 line pairs per millimeter, or a Woodpecker, which is rated at 8 line pairs per millimeter. But almost everybody else in between, we're going to be at 20 line pairs per millimeter. The next piece that we're going to talk about are pixels. Pixels, I mean, we talk about pixels a lot, especially when everybody was moving towards digital cameras and how many pixels do you have? Well, I've got this many pixels and along those lines, but they're just tiny squares that make up the digital image. So the more pixels we have equals more detail. So in actuality, what we're looking for is the smallest number of pixels in terms of the number. So for example, the Tuxedo sensor has 19 pixels. I have a newer sensor coming out, hopefully by the end of the year here, that has actually 14 pixels on it, which is actually better image quality then. And so, line pairs, the greater the number, the better the resolution. On pixels, the lower the number, the greater the resolution. With all that being said, image quality is very subjective from dentist to dentist. I walked into one dental practice and shown, we took an image, and I had one dentist come by and say, yep, that's perfect, I love it. I had another one come in and say, I absolutely hate that one. So getting it dialed in for you at this point is really more of how you want to see it. How grayscale do you as a dentist want to look at this, as well as what filters inside the imaging software can we manipulate to get it to where you want. So once again, quite honestly, most sensors on the market these days have great image quality, whether it's mine or somebody else's. What's going to differentiate you choosing which sensor to go with, I find, is many other factors that also we talked about, or quite in the 4 pillars there. With all that being said, the X-ray head does have a good amount of to do with the image quality that you're going to get. Now, we all know ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable, is the goal. However, if you need to increase the exposure rate, you can get a sharper image many times. Poor image quality is usually better solved under sensor positioning, the software settings probably have more to do with anything else rather than just cranking up the X-ray. So patient comfort, why size matters. So comfort factors. It actually is shocking that it took us as long to come up with the rounded corners as it did. It's kind of along the lines of we put a man on the moon before we thought of putting wheels on suitcases. And so now most sensor companies out there do have rounded corners. Making them thin, though, is probably the biggest piece because it's going on the lingual side of the teeth, and you don't have to be right up against the teeth. You actually want to be just past the ridges there to be able to get a really good image. But still, thinner is better. And so, compare, create a little spreadsheet for yourself when you're looking at different sensors and say, okay, how thin is this sensor? Our sensor is 5.6 millimeters thin. One of the other ones I've talked about recently or on this call is 8.3 millimeters. And that 2 millimeters can make a huge difference in the patient comfort. The other piece is size options. So basically most companies have a size 1 and a size 2. Some have a size 1.5. And every now and then you'll run across a company that has a size 0. But quite honestly, those are very, very rarely used. So why it matters, though, uncomfortable sensors, if you get it in there, I'm sure this has happened to you before, you put it into the patient's mouth, you say, hold still, they gulp, they adjust a little bit, and it moves, and you have to then take another retake, which takes extra time as well, right? And the patient's getting frustrated, you're getting frustrated. So comfort really matters when it comes to efficiency when taking x-rays. And obviously just better comfort equals you're going to get better images, it's going to be a faster workflow, and your patients are going to be happier. So this is where the rubber meets the road, though, software compatibility. And so I'm going to dive into this in great detail because I think this is where you can actually save a lot of money, but also look out for pitfalls. So the flash here is my direct integration. Direct integration, you'll hear from sensor companies a lot and a little bit from the software companies. It's the absolute best. And the reason why is you should have a smooth and fast workflow. You should plug the sensor in. It should recognize that. If not, you should have a quick drop down to say, yep, this is the sensor I'm using. And then the sensor and the software speak together and have the filters inside the software already set. Then the way this works is a little inside information. A company like Tuxedo that has a sensor will send our software development kit to the imaging software company. We then work with them to identify the best workflow to get the best images because every sensor company is going to be somewhat different in terms of how sensitive it is to radiation, what gamma it has to be at, as well as all the other little filters that go in there that you don't want to deal with every time you get a new sensor. So we work with the software companies to ensure we have direct integration. And at Tuxedo Imaging, we have direct integration with nearly every imaging software out there. So whether it's Aprix, whether it's Dentrix Ascend, whether it's TigerView, XDR, Overjet's Iris, CareStack, we have direct integration with dozens and dozens of imaging software companies. Now, what happens, though, if you don't have direct integration? Then we have our friend here, Shania Twain. No, I'm just kidding. It's not Shania Twain, but it is a Twain, right? And a lot of people hear Twain, and they start to get hives because they've had bad interactions with Twains in the past, and I fully understand that. Another interesting tidbit is that TWAIN is actually an acronym. We know SCUBA is an acronym. I actually don't know what that stands for. I think self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. Okay, I did remember it. And I haven't scuba dived in like 20 years. But TWAIN actually stands for Technology Without an Interesting Name. And so what TWAINs were designed to do is actually help scanners like desktop printer scanners communicate to your computer and move that image into the computer then. Well, TWAINs for sensors are very similar in that it helps the sensor talk to the software if we don't have direct integration. Now, with all that being said, not all TWAINs are created equal. So, for example, the TWAIN, some companies charge for a TWAIN, and to me, that's ridiculous. If my sensor doesn't automatically work with your software, why am I going to charge you even more money for that? But so we actually give our TWAIN for free if we don't have direct integration for you. With that being said, the TWAIN should make your workflow as seamless as possible. And what our TWAIN allows us to do is take batch take batches of images before we put it into the imaging software. Sometimes TWAINs will take one image and then the whole thing has to reset, sometimes requiring 2 or 3 keystrokes to reset the TWAIN before moving on to the next image or image capture. So, it's really important when you're talking to a sensor company to know, one, if they have direct integration with your imaging software, and then two, if it has to use a TWAIN, how seamless is the TWAIN to be used on that? So the last part here is the total cost of ownership. And so hopefully the math checks out for you when you're looking at your sensors and software and tying it all together. So once again, your upfront price is not the true cost of a sensor in most cases. So you have the price you're going to pay for a sensor. If you're buying a Dexus or a Schick sensor, you're spending $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 for the sensor. But it doesn't end there. Many times they also have license fees, things like that. And so you'll want to look for that. Do they have what we call an SLA, subscriber licensing agreement fee? Support costs. Is there a cost when you call in and need some troubleshooting done? Is it free? If it's free, for what period of time? Do they charge you for the drivers that need to go into certain softwares? Do they charge you for the TWAIN? If your sensor goes down, do they have a loaner program? All these things are not, you need to understand how that's going to play in when your sensor goes down or you need troubleshooting help or things like that. So your upfront price is not the end true cost of the sensor. The warranty length. So, our sensor here at Tuxedo Imaging, we have a 3-year manufacturer warranty. So that covers any manufacturer defect for 3 years. Most imaging or most sensor companies have a warranty of 1, maybe 2 years. And once again, what is covered under that? Under ours, it's anything that is a manufacturer defect, but maybe not what we would consider unusual wear and tear. What is unusual wear and tear? And this is true of most sensor companies. I call it the 3 horsemen of the sensor apocalypse. It's going to be bites, drops, and staff using your sensor as a lasso. So wearing out the cord, not taking care of it that way. So know the warranty length and know what is covered and not covered under your warranty as well. So post-purchase support. This is one thing that drives me crazy. If you buy a sensor and it takes us usually 5 to 10 minutes to do some quick diagnosis to figure out whether it's a sensor problem or whether it's a software problem and you would need to contact the imaging software people. So I've seen, though, where the sensor companies are going to charge you, $30 a month or $250 a year or more for ongoing support. Usually you're not calling a sensor company more than once or twice a year for any sort of support, and it takes us 5 minutes. Why are we going to nickel and dime you on that? We make a good amount of money on the sensor itself. We don't need to nickel and dime you. So what type of support you get from the sensor company and how much that costs you is a very important thing to know. One thing you want to do is look at your return on investment over the expected 3 to 5 year lifespan of a sensor. I say the sensor should last you 4 to 6 years, depending on usage and which one you're using. But if you want to look at it either a 3-year time frame or a 5-year time frame, look at what your total cost is for the upfront price, what any sort of support fees would be, license fees, driver fees, all those things, and then divide that by your 5 years to figure out which one is going to have the best return on investment for you. I kind of covered this already then. Look out for hidden fees. Are they locked into a contract of any kind? Are there fees for a subscriber license agreement or drivers or TWAINs or anything else? And is there extra software that you need to buy in order to make it all work? So once again, the cheapest upfront often costs the most long term. The other thing to think about on this is a lot of offices have begun to lease their sensors. And it sounds like a great idea until you run those actual numbers. Really, if the sensor's going to last you 5 years, figure out how much that's going to cost you over 5 years. It's shocking how much those leases can actually run you. So financial pitfalls to avoid. Look out for deals that are going to have recurring fees. The second one is actually a very interesting one, especially in the dental imaging marketplace, because if you buy a sensor software combo and you are locked into that sensor, just know that when your upfront cost on that is going to be a lot. But then when you need to buy a new sensor, those new sensors usually cost twice as much as a budget-friendly sensor, like say a Tuxedo imaging one or one of our competitors. That is one thing that you definitely want to look out for. If you're buying the Apple of dental imaging, just know that you're going to pay a lot more for that, both upfront and then when it's time to replace your sensor again. Look out for extended warranties with little value. That's one thing that we've run into with talking with practices who purchase other sensors. They may have an extended warranty, but what is actually included in that extended warranty then? Costly integration mistakes, that can be as simple as, making sure that, some practices are perfectly fine with utilizing a TWAIN, but once again, not all TWAINs are created equal. If direct integration is important to you, make sure that your sensor works seamlessly with that imaging software that you have. And then I mentioned before, CapEx versus OpEx. So, the Tuxedo sensor runs $39.95 is what we normally sell it for. But if you're going to lease a sensor at $495 upfront cost and then lease it for $139 a month, you're going to spend about $8,500 to $9,000 over the course of that 5 years. So it's going to be twice as expensive, even though it's lower price upfront. So run the numbers, run the return on investment, and you'll make a determination if that low upfront cost makes sense, or if you'd rather look at it over a 5-year time frame of what your sensor should last you, and think that hopefully you're going to save money by doing it that way. So building out your workflow, assess what you already have. What imaging software do you have? What practice management software do I have? Will these things work together? If I'm looking at other imaging software, or if I'm looking at practice management software, will all these things work together? Will my sensor communicate with my imaging software as well? Identify your gaps and your must-haves, right? And so a lot of these software companies will definitely throw out to you like, well, you can do this, 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 and this. But, it's kind of like when you buy a car. They throw all these bells and whistles at you, but maybe you don't want all the bells and whistles. Maybe you just want a nice, simple workflow without all those. For me, I would choose a flexible, budget-friendly, high-quality solution. For me, the key is flexible, because the technology is changing rapidly in this space right now. And if I'm locked into a sensor software combo, I know that's just going to cost me more and more and more over time. So if I want something that it has a history of having open architecture and the ability to change hardware without being locked in on their proprietary systems. Implement smart maintenance routines, and then review costs annually to avoid drift. When it comes to maintenance, that's one thing I definitely wanted to touch on here. It was one of our core bullet points on this. So honestly, there's a reason why I have our little girl here taking a chomp at the finger. Make sure you and the staff are not telling the patient to bite down on the sensor. Use the term close gently or something similar. That will solve so many issues on sensor repairs and or breakages, just because patients here bite down, they're going to bite as hard as possible. So we want them to close gently, and along that lines, use a positioning device. I have an example here of the Dentsply Sirona DS RIN kit, a DS Fit RIN kit. And these things are godsend. One, they make the workflow much, much faster. And then two, it also protects the sensor as well. So, spending a little bit of money on a RIN kit can definitely, or something similar, can definitely save your sensors in the long run. Two, cleaning. Make sure that we're cleaning them according to proper procedures. And then the biggest one, watch out for the cable. Most issues that happen with a sensor happen on the cable. So you want to make sure that the staff are treating the cable with care. Make sure you have holders in the operatories so that they're not getting hung on doors or things like that. That will make it last much longer. The QR code that I have on the screen here actually takes you to a blog post that we did a few months ago with tips and tricks for you to take advantage or for you to maximize the service length of your dental sensors. So I'll wait a second for everybody to take a screenshot of that. I think Dr. Levine's also going to send this out so you can have it as well. So, another thing I forgot I was going to mention. If you have a special needs patient, you may also want to keep a phosphor plate around. That's actually one thing that we've recommended that, if you're treating special needs patients, they, don't understand or may not understand the instructions as well. If they bite and destroy a phosphor plate, you're not out nearly as much as a $4,000 sensor. The other nice thing is if you really do need a size 0 for a small child, then you can also get a phosphor plate in a size 0 as well. You just need to make sure you can scan those in, but it'll still count as your digital workflow then. So having that flexibility of having a phosphor plate system for special needs and or small children is a really good option. I don't sell those, but I just want to make sure that you guys know that's a great option for your practice as well. So a little bit about Tuxedo imaging as we finish up here. Tuxedo sensors are high quality, durable. We're all about transparent pricing. We sell direct. We don't go through distribution, which is one reason why we're able to sell at such a lower price point, is that we don't have all the layers of people to pay when we sell you a sensor. So, it's highly affordable. We've been around multiple years. We were actually spun out of one of the imaging software companies many years ago. And so, our standard sensor lasts, we stay right around 5 years. Multiple integrations, I mentioned that before. We are directly integrated with Dentrix Ascend, with Overjet's new software Iris, with CareStack, with Aptrix from Planet DDS, and many in between. If you have any questions, I'm going to have my email and phone number on the backside of this. If you want to know if we work with your imaging software, either shoot me a call or an email. The screen, or we have a 3-year warranty, no deductible on the warranty as long as it's covered issue. 80% of our warranties are covered, or returns are covered under the warranty. And then the key for us is, and I think Dr. Levine mentioned this at the beginning of the webinar, we have unlimited lifetime support. So even if after the sensor is no longer under warranty, if you call us and need help with any sort of troubleshooting or anything else, we're not going to charge you a support fee, right? It makes no sense to me. We stand behind our products. We have unlimited lifetime support. As long as the sensor is operational, we will call and do whatever we can to help you with that. And for those of you on this webinar today, we have a special code of TUXTALK500. So you can actually go on our website and buy the sensor directly there. And if you use that code, it'll take an additional $500 off to bring the price down to $34.95 then. So, and then just key takeaways, absolutely necessary. You need a reliable sensor with a warranty and hopefully not have extended upsells. You need imaging software that directly integrates with your practice management software and hopefully has direct integration with your sensors as well. Make sure you have good backup and storage solution, whether it's on premises or in the cloud. That's absolute necessity nowadays. And make sure you have good training and support from whatever companies you're working with. Nice to haves. The AI modules are popping up left and right nowadays. Extra software bundles that have little to no value, watch out for those. Look out for extended warranties. If you don't understand what it's going to cover, chances are it's just a money grab. and then any other proprietary accessories that you don't really need. And things to watch out for at the end: hidden recurring fees, whether it's licenses, seat changes, upgrades, things you need to pay something to unlock other features or hardware that should just automatically come with it. Look out for that. And then look out for anything that has a very low upfront cost but high ongoing long-term expenses. So we'll go ahead and open up for questions then, Dr. Levine, if you have anything anybody's written in.
We definitely have some questions. Thank you. That was great information. I know a few people logged in a little bit late, so as a reminder, the webinar was recorded, so don't worry if you missed the opening part of it. The recording should go out sometime in the next day or two. As far as CE credits are concerned, if you made it this far, other than if you just logged on 6 minutes ago, but if you've been here the whole time, you will get a CE certificate. As long as you're here for the bulk of the webinar, I will have a report sent to me when we're done as far as when you logged in, when you logged out, and as long as you meet the minimum, then you'll be sent to see your certificate. It's just a Word document. It's California-based CE. You can put in your own name and address and send it off to your state dental society. That should go out probably tonight, maybe tomorrow. There's nothing that you need to do to earn that CE other than being here. There's no registration or test or anything like that. As soon as the webinar's done, you're done. And then we're going to move on with getting that out to you. So, Jeremy, we do have some questions. You ready to go for it?
Ready when you are, sir.
Okay, so can you mention again what is the best type of TWAIN to use if I decide to use a TWAIN?
So the TWAIN should actually come from the imaging or from the dental sensor company itself then, because they know what the TWAIN is going to work best with their sensor company. So for example, if with my sensor, we give the TWAIN automatically for free with the sensor if you have to use the TWAIN and we don't have direct integration.
Okay. One thing I would add to that, and Jeremy had mentioned this in his lecture, not a lot of companies are doing this anymore, but the key thing I think from a workflow standpoint is the TWAIN has to allow for auto advance. The original TWAINs that came out were basically like the ones they use for panos, and they were only designed to take one image. So you would take it, then you'd have to stop, and you'd have to click stop, and then you'd have to click on the next tile and click start. You don't want that. You want something that if you're taking in an 18 or 20 series FMX, that you're going to take the first image and it's automatically going to go to the next tile. That ideally the only time you're touching your mouse is when you start and stop the series. There was a request if you could put up that list of the must-haves versus the optional one more time.
Here we go.
Perfect. We'll do that for a couple of minutes because we have a few more questions here. So the longevity, is the 5 to 6 years, is that more of a theoretical or is that actually real world that they should expect about 5, 6 years? And what typically would cause a sensor to fail after that time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, in my bio, we talked about how I worked at Dentsply Sirona for a long time. And one of the most common questions I got came to Cavitron inserts. Like, how long should my Cavitron insert actually last? And like many things, our answer was always, it depends. It depends on how many patients you see in a given day. It depends on, the amount of calculus that was on the teeth and whether you're, how much scaling and root cleaning you're doing versus just regular cleaning, things like that. It's going to be the same way when we talk about sensors. It depends on, are we doing a lot of FMX? Are we just doing bite wings? And then how much are we taking care of the sensor itself? Like I said, the majority of the problems that we see tend to come at the cable itself and where the cable hub meets the sensor piece itself. And so the more you can take care of that, the better off it'll be. It's not just theoretical. I mean, our most common sale of a Tuxedo sensor is someone who's had their sensor for about 5 years. That's right about when they start to see issues. And, everything degrades over time. And so, the more radiation you get hit with on this is going to degrade the sensor as it goes along. It's something called delamination we see a lot of. So it's not just theoretical. Most of our sensors we see lasting right between 4 to 6 years, with that number 5 year mean being dead on.
Okay. So here's an interesting question. So your sensor is priced less than half of a Dexis or Schick or something like that. Why is it because you're using inferior components, which I know is a fact is not the case, or I guess the better question is, why are those ones so expensive? Is it because they got to pay the Schick and Patterson reps, their cut, or why are some of them still priced so high compared to your sensor, which is still a good quality sensor?
It's certainly not inferior components, anything like that. I mean, I'll take the Pepsi challenge against for image quality and durability against any other company. It is primarily that difference. We, at Tuxedo Imaging, we run very lean, and we don't have layers and layers of people and overhead that we have to cover then. The biggest expense that you see from your suppliers is going to be the margin that they have to charge between wholesale and retail in order to cover all their overhead between sales reps, sales managers, the individual branch. They got to buy all the products, bring it in, store it. There's inventory carrying costs and everything else. With us, we are hyper focused on digital sensors and intraoral cameras. And so we don't have that overhead, and that's why we're able to keep our costs as low as we can.
Okay. You'd mentioned the 3-year warranty. What happens if a sensor starts to fail after the warranty? Are they typically looking at replacement? Are there certain situations where it can be repaired? What's the normal course of events?
Quite honestly, it's usually having to buy a new sensor, even when if it is a warrantable repair. So let's say, after 2 years, we see that delamination and it's, we'll replace the sensor. We don't repair the sensor. We actually send out a brand new sensor on that. It costs us more. It would cost us more to repair it than it would be to just build a brand new one, just because of the processes that we have to go through. So, usually at that point, then it makes sense to just replacing it a new one.
Okay. You had mentioned there's a long list of integration with imaging software programs. Maybe it'd be easier. Are there certain image programs that right now the Tuxedo does not integrate with?
The two big ones that give me the hardest time are going to be Dexis and Carestream. I mentioned how when you have a closed system between software and hardware, you're going to get locked into more expensive ones there. So, for example, Dexis, I don't like to call out companies, but I'll just tell you how they operate. They have their imaging software and they have their sensors, and they will allow you, you can pay to unlock and allow third-party sensors, but then you still have to use a TWAIN with that. And so that, I can work with Dexis, I can work with Carestream with the TWAIN. It's just not as easy as when we have direct integration like a bunch of those other ones I mentioned.
Yeah, and I would add to that is not a unique Tuxedo problem. We've been installing digital X-rays for 20 plus years into Dexis. We had an office just recently that had bought a really cheap sensor, and Dexis said, sure, we'll allow you to use it with our software, but you have to buy our TWAIN module, and it was a $2,500 cost. And for any of you who do programming and know anything about TWAIN, it's a few lines of code that somebody wrote, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And, what we said to the client was, them charging, and again, I'm not trying to single out Dexis, but being charged $2,500 for a 10-year-old piece of software code is highway robbery. So it's not, and and as you mentioned, Jeremy, that's any closed system like a Dexis, like a Carestream, Schick CDR was like that for a while as well. They just make it really hard. They of course, why would they want you to use someone else's stuff when you can pay 2-3 times the cost and buy their sensor?
Right. That's why I said flexibility is such a key part. Yeah.
What about for an office who's never used your sensors before? They have a software, but maybe they've used it for phosphor plate. but they have no idea about, how do you position it, how do what's the workflow? Do you guys offer any type of staff training, or how does that work to onboard someone who's never used a hard sensor before and they're just getting into it with Tuxedo?
Really good question. That is something I'm just still developing. We have kind of a positioning checklist on our website, on our blog section. But in terms of getting up and going and training and stuff like that, I have some outsourced resources that would be a better fit than me just trying to talk to them about that. I have some consultants that I know who would be best to train the office on how to do that.
Okay. Well, timing is good because we're at the top of the hour and we're out of questions. So anything you'd like to say before we call it a night?
Just thank you, everybody, very much for your time today. I hope the information was informative and useful, and hopefully not too dry. I try to make it as fun as possible, but it's not the most exciting subject. But hopefully it was entertaining. And then once again, I have my email address, our direct line there, and then also a QR code. It'll take you to our website. You just plug around. There's a contact us page. Any questions at all, feel free to give us a call. If you want to know if we'll work with your software or, how it all plays out, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. We'd love to help you practice this out.
Great. Well, I want to thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. As an aside, I met Jeremy at the Chicago Midwinter meeting last year. We started chatting. I was familiar with Tuxedo. We had a number of our clients who were tired of paying the exorbitant fees, not just the upfront fees that we were talking about, but as Jeremy mentioned, those monthly, yearly support fees, upgrade fees, update fees. They're just getting tired of the nickel and dimed. And we started recommending Tuxedo to a number of our clients. We have a single client come back and complain to us and say, "Oh, we don't like the sensor." Everyone likes the image quality. They like the level of support that they get. They like the fact that what they paid is what they paid, and they're not constantly paying for ongoing fees beyond that. So I would encourage you to reach out to him, to give them a try. Like I said, we haven't had anyone that's had any problems with them, and obviously the price is as competitive as anything out there. We thank all of you for joining us. As a final reminder, the webinar was recorded. That recording should go out sometime in the next 24 hours. Same for the CE certificates. When you log out, there's nothing you need to do. I will have the list of when you logged in and out, and I will make sure that all of you who were here for the bulk of the webinar get that CE form also sent out within the next 24 hours. We do these on a regular basis, and I would love to have Jeremy come back in maybe 6 to 8 weeks, give or take, and do another webinar. There's so much to talk about when it comes to digital radiography, and he just kind of scratched the surface about some of these things, but I think it would be great to bring him back and do a deeper dive. So thank you again, Jeremy. Thanks to Tuxedo for allowing you to be here with us tonight. And of course, thanks to all of you. We know your time is valuable. We like to do these webinars on a regular basis. As long as people are showing up, we're going to keep doing it. And when we have a couple hundred people signed up, I'm going to keep doing it as long as people want me to. So please enjoy the rest of your summer and what's left of it until Labor Day. You'll all be on the invitation list for the next webinar. So please stay safe and healthy, as I said, and we look forward to seeing all of you for the next webinar. Good night, everyone.